What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 23 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk to you about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. Today, we're joined by Paul Jamison. He is the owner of a landscaping business in Atlanta and the host of the Green Industry Podcast, an excellent resource with more than 100 episodes, including interviews with green industry experts and discussions with landscapers. How to Hardscape is a proud sponsor of the Green Industry Podcast, and last week I showed up on Paul's show for an interview. Go over and give that episode a listen. That is episode 103, and show Paul some love by going over and subscribing if you are interested in listening more to his show. Give his show a rating and review, and without further ado, here's our interview with Paul Jamison. Today we are joined by Paul Jamison. He is the host of the Green Industry Podcast, and he owns a landscape company out in Atlanta. Paul, thank you so much for joining me here.
What's up, Mike? It's good to be with you.
Yeah, this is great. And we just did a interview on your show, and now it's great to have you on mine talking more business, and let's get into it. So let's start with Paul. You know, what's your background in the industry? What got you into landscaping?
Yeah, talk more business. Are you insinuating our talk about manis and petties wasn't business enough with the episode on my show?
It was a great discussion for sure.
That was a lot of fun. Well, I got a two-headed monster here. Of course, I host the Green Industry Podcast, which we chat very similar to yours with, industry experts and leaders of how to build a profitable, successful business, and also how to live a purposeful life. I mean, what's the purpose of just having a whole bunch of money if our relationships aren't thriving and healthy? And so, we focus a lot on having a healthy marriage, healthy, children, healthy family life, while, having, outrageously prosperous businesses. So it's been a lot of fun, chatting. We just got done with our 100th episode earlier in the week, and, we are on fire and, having so much fun, getting ready to fly down to Mississippi here, to go to a event down there, and going to be doing a lot of traveling this year, taking the show on the road, interviewing folks. And then I've entering into my 10th season, owning a lawn care and landscaping company. We started with a lot of lawn mowing, cutting that grass and making that cash. We evolved into more higher profit landscape installations, which is the bread and butter of what we do now. And we've gotten a lot of really cool, a lot of our customers are NFL football players or coaches in the NFL, and we've gotten to do a lot of fun work for a lot of people. So that's my world. But we had you on the podcast earlier today, and had a lot of fun chatting. So I look forward to being on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about business together on your show. We got into a lot of other discussions for sure, but let's focus on yourself and your background in this industry. Like, what made you get into landscaping? What prompted you to start your own landscaping business?
Absolutely. So I share this story a lot. I have a friend, and he is an incredible musician. And so he gets a phone call one day. I don't know if you're familiar with a gentleman named Randy Jackson. He used to do a show called American Idol here in the USA. You know who that is?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Randy Jackson's hanging out, I think out in LA or wherever, with his buddies. And my friend, who lives in Atlanta, very skilled. I mean, this dude is skilled singer, musician. And Randy Jackson just happened, my buddy was playing one of his songs, and Randy Jackson just kind of in the background just kind of heard his song. And he's like, wow, who in the world is that? And the guy said, oh, that's Christian. He's in Atlanta. And Randy's like, you got his phone number? He's like, yeah. So let me call him. So Randy Jackson calls my friend. And all my friend's chilling, this random number calls him, and he's like, hello. He's like, hey, is this Christian? He's like, yeah. And he's thinking it's a telemarketer or whatever. He's like, hey, it's Randy Jackson from American Idol. So my friend says, ha, 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 and hangs up on him. Thought it was a prank. And it really was the real Randy Jackson. So Randy says, call him back one more time. He hung up on me. And he calls back, and my friend answers, and he's like, hey, this is Randy again. We must have got disconnected. And my friend's thinking, man, that kind of actually does sound like him. And he's like, hey, by the way, out here in the studio, we just heard one of your songs. Incredible raw talent. would love to work with you. Where you live? And my friend's like, still thinking it's a prank, but thinking maybe it's not a prank. So he's like, Atlanta. And he's like, all right. He's like, well, hopping on a flight, headed your way. Can you do steak, tomorrow at 7? And, he's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, meet me here. And, so my friend hangs up and he tells his wife, he's like, I think I just got pranked, but maybe Randy Jackson just called me. And, she's like, what did he say? And he's like, we're going to go get steak at 7:00 tomorrow in Buckhead. Buckhead's the rich part of Atlanta. And his wife's like, I don't think so. And he's like, I think it was him. So my friend, the next day, goes down to Buckhead. And this is I'm answering the question, how I started my landscaping company. This is the story.
No, for sure.
So he goes down. This is how it started. Honestly, a call by Randy Jackson led to this moment. He goes down, still slightly skeptical, but it's like, well, if it's real, then this could be life changing. If it's a prank, then my buddy got me real good. You know what I mean? So he goes down to Buckhead, which is the rich and famous part of town. And, he pulls down, he goes down, and here comes a black fancy SUV. Here comes the bodyguards, gets out. They open the back door. Randy Jackson walks out. My friend's like, unbelievable. And he walks up and, hey, you Christian? He's like, yeah. And he's like, I didn't know this was real. He's like, I told you yesterday, man. I called you. And so they have steak dinner, and it's all expensive and stuff. Randy buys it. Long story short, he invites my friend out west to work on music. My friend calls me and says, Paul, you'll never believe this. Tells me the story. It's a lot longer version, and I'm telling you, I just gave you the clip notes. He says, I need a huge favor from you. I was like, what? And I thought I'm going to go on tour or something, like, something fun. And he's like, my house is $928 a month mortgage plus utilities. Will you please move into my house for a year and pay the mortgage? The house is yours for a year. I have to go pursue my music dream. And I was actually looking for a place to live. I think that's why he called me. And I was like, sure, why not? I move into his house. And I'm fresh out of college. I am trying to, make money and all that. And so I'm in a desperate place in life. So I go on a walk around the neighborhood in this new house I'm living in for the year. And I'm really trying to figure out, like, what should I be doing with my life? So I'm praying, talking to God, walking around the neighborhood on a prayer walk, like, God help me. Like, what should I do with my life? Kind of not out loud, but quietly. I didn't want to look crazy in front of the neighborhood, but I'm in my heart, I'm crying out, like, what should I do with my life? And I get to this cul-de-sac, and there's a house, and it was the most bizarre situation to me because the house was for sale, and the grass was like 3 feet tall. And I'm like, who in the world, what kind of marketing plan is that you're going to try to sell a house and it's going to be the ugliest lawn in the neighborhood? Like, this makes no sense. So I called the lady out of interest. I'm like, this makes no sense to me. And I said, ma'am, there's a house for sale at this address. And she's like, yeah, we're aware. It's our listing. And I said, well, why don't you make it look more appealing? I was like, the grass hasn't been cut in a month. It looks horrible. It's embarrassing. And she told me that the lawn care guy that has done her work for, I think like 25 years had a tragedy. He was in the hospital. He thought he was going to get out and get back to work. And he was just a one-man show. But his recovery's taken longer than thought. And she's like, we're trying to figure out, because in the spring in Atlanta, like, you can't just call someone reputable and be like, hey, come do my lawn. Like, it's everyone's booked. You know what I mean? So she's like, we're trying to find a company. And she's like, what's your price? And I literally had a cartoon moment. The light bulb went off in my head. Here I am asking God for money. And this lady just asked me what my price is. And so I told her, and I gave her a price. I'm like, let's do it. And I didn't know anything about business or lawn mowing or anything. I knew there was a mower in the garage that, I cut the grass with. So the guy, $60, we'll take care of it. She's like, great. As soon as you're done, shoot us the picture and we'll mail you the check. So I went back home and got the mower and got to work. And that was my very first yard. And then we did that one. And then she gave us a bunch of other yards. I basically took over that guy's business because he was out of commission. Unfortunate health, body broke down. So I started doing all those yards, and just perfect timing. My friend had a lawn care business, successful lawn care business, years prior. And that year he had bought a nursery in town, and he the nursery, we had an early spring that year, and he was just going crazy at the nursery selling plants, and he hadn't gotten around to selling he had professional equipment from weed eaters to hedge trimmers to edgers to commercial mowers to he had the whole setup, and he hadn't sold it yet. So he's like, hey, in the meantime, until you can afford to buy all your own stuff, just use my stuff. And so that was huge because I didn't have to, buy a bunch of stuff right out of the gate. I was able to work, save up and buy, work, save up and buy, work, save up and buy. So that's how we all started. The first few years was an absolute disaster. I was undercharging. I was taking on more than I could handle. I didn't have mentors. I was just, I made about every mistake you could imagine. I made it. It's funny in hindsight, but at the time it was stress, anxiety, and fear. But I love working out in the yard and making properties look awesome. And then over the next few years after that, I got mentors. I got plugged into the online community. I started learning how to price appropriately, and we started really getting profitable and making good money, and the rest is history.
Absolutely. And Paul, it's obvious that you're in radio and that you host a podcast because you're an excellent storyteller, and that was really great. But going off of the story you just told us there, and you getting into this landscaping and starting your own business, where did you learn about doing landscaping? Like, as you went along, who were you turning to, and what resources did you turn to be able to learn the different things that you needed to learn in order to not only grow your business, but know the skills to be able to do the things you do skillfully?
Yeah, so 2011 is when I got my start, and the YouTube community didn't really start until 2013. So that's kind of when Greg Chisholm, Geek to Freak Lawn Care, and Lawn Care Rookie Naylor Taliaferro, B&B Lawn Care, Brian Topnotch, Stanley Genetic, Keith Kalfas, all those guys I became friends with in 2013 and 14 and began watching their YouTube videos and began learning from them. 2011, 2012, I was borrowing a Honda Accord from my friend, or renting it rather, for $150 a month. So I had my weed eater. I'd angle it in the back seat, and I'd angle it just right so it would sit out the passenger side window. I'd put my mower, I'd fold it down and put it in the trunk. I didn't even own a truck. My first season, I worked out of a Honda Accord. And then in 2012, I bought my first truck, a Ford F-150. I actually still have that truck today. It's been around since the beginning with the company. We've added a new transmission and painted a job and all this stuff. So the first 2 years were absolute learning as we go, making every mistake in the book. Once I got plugged into listening to Stanley Genetic, who I'm sure you've probably posted his episodes by now, I started watching his YouTube videos and learning from him. And I started learning from all these guys and then making comments on YouTube. And then we actually started talking on Instagram and Snapchat. And I became friends with these guys and picking their brains. And then a couple local companies, I asked the guys, like, can you please teach me how to do landscaping? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm working. Literally, I leave my house. It's still dark. I get home when it's dark, and I'm barely paying my bills, or I'm not paying them all. And I'm not doing something right because I'm working harder than my friends with jobs, yet I'm struggling. So he took me out for a long cup of coffee. I think we talked all afternoon at Panera Bread at the coffee shop in Atlanta. And we talked for a long time, and he taught me about numbers. And then I met another friend, same deal, actually went to his home, and his wife cooked us dinner, and we chatted for hours about numbers. And so I had the privilege of men who've been in the industry for, 15, 20 years, of them sitting down with me and taking a look into my business and basically telling me, you're not charging enough. You're not efficient enough, and learning all that stuff from them, plus the online community of just digesting as much content as possible. And that's why I started my show in 2018, because I wanted to be a resource for the community now that I'm on the other side where I have a profitable, just as we're talking, I literally just got a text message from an executive here in Atlanta. He works one of those corner skyscraper offices in downtown Atlanta, a big shot for a big billion dollar company. He just texted me that there's such an excellent condition of his property that he just shared me with another high roller. So that's the kind of world we're in now, but it wasn't always that way. So I just think the online community on YouTube, podcast, growing that way. And then the men who, and women, actually, I have a master gardener friend who's a woman that take the time to teach me from their history of building profitable businesses.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And when it comes to getting those referrals, obviously those are, the most valuable leads coming into any business, the ones that, somebody's spoken highly of you, or they've seen you around, they've seen your work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And when did those start coming in for you for your business?
Okay, Saturday morning, it was this was the day my life changed forever. It had a divine setup, if you will. I was at the time, I was actually part-time in my lawn care business at that time, because you did mention I do broadcasting. I was offered a full-time midday radio show to a huge audience in Atlanta. I was a disc jockey, a radio personality in Atlanta, Monday through Friday. So that would leave me, my show would get over at 2 p.m. So I'd go in the afternoons and I'd do my, lawn care landscaping stuff. And then the weekends that was my go time. Saturdays, we'd get started at 8 a.m. and we'd work till dark. So Saturdays was my day because I had a full-time job. Now that I unfortunately had to transition from that broadcasting job because I pursued my dreams, with the landscaping company and podcast and all that. But, so Saturday mornings we would start at 8 a.m., but we had a customer who he found us through search engine optimization. He found us through Google. He lives in Silicon Valley. He's a, multimillionaire, and he has a vacation home in a very high-end neighborhood in Atlanta. And so he typed in his city, lawn care companies, and we popped up right at the top. So he called me, and he actually said he called two other guys before me, but they didn't pick up. And he called me, and I answered the phone, and I got his job and basically said, hey, I live out here in California, but we got a vacation home in Atlanta. Can you take care of it? And I said, yes, sir. So we, long story short, or short story long, as I tend to do, we would do his yard at 8 a.m. on Saturday mornings because he wasn't there. He was in California, and no one wants you blowing your blower or running your mower 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. That's, what I mean? But since no one lived in the house, we figured we could start with his yard every Saturday morning. So one Saturday morning, Mike, I dropped my worker off. He's starting the maintenance. I had to run to Home Depot to pick up a supply. I'm at Home Depot, and my worker called me. And I knew if he called me, because this is a go-getter type guy, like he'd figure stuff out. Like he doesn't need to call me. So when he called me, I knew something bad happened. He calls me. He's like, hey, Paul. And I could tell he was nervous. And I was like, what's going on? And he's like, the neighbor lady's here with me, and she's not too happy that we do this yard every morning at 8 a.m. And just wanted to let you know. And I was like, okay. I was like, we'll stop running the machine so we're not a disturbance, and I'll be right there. So I left Home Depot, and I came back, and I wanted to go over to this lady and apologize. She was a next door neighbor. She wasn't our customer. And I knocked on the door, and I said, hey, I'm Paul. I just wanted to deeply apologize. I know 8 a.m. on Saturday mornings, you probably don't want to be woken up with a blower. I just wanted to let you know the reason that we always do your neighbor's yard is at 8 a.m. on Saturday is because they live in California, and we didn't, we knew they weren't home, but we should have been more thoughtful to the fact that we were maybe disturbing you. And she was so blown away by that. She's like, oh, and she's like, thank you for the apology. You didn't need to do that. And she's like, well, by the way, while you're here, we've noticed you did such a great job next door. We had a couple questions. We're not happy with our current provider, and started asking me about her property. So long story short, she hired me. Long story short, her husband was the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons NFL football team. So we started doing his yard. Well, next thing you know, we did a great job. He started referring us to the star players. We started doing the captain of the Atlanta Falcons, a bunch of the other coaches. And I'm literally now going down at Atlanta Falcons. I don't know if you follow American football, but they're the team here in the NFL. So now they go down, like the way the NFL works is on Saturday nights, the team and the coaches stay at the hotel so they don't get stuck in traffic on game day. So then on game days, I drive his wife and her girlfriends down to the game. We park I park next to Julio Jones's Rolls Royce. I'm hanging out in the parking garage, going down into the locker room, getting, I'll be on the field before the game. And, I'm friends with the players, and they're my customers, and people I'm down there with celebrities left and right. the celebrities in Atlanta, just absolutely living the dream. It's all because my lawn care landscaping company. I mean, literally, it was the year the Falcons went to the Super Bowl. I went to the playoff games, and we're popping champagne with the players in the garage, in the parking lot, in the first in the locker room, in the parking lot after the game. It's absolutely nuts. And so, yeah, now I got customers that play for the Arizona Cardinals football team that have they're actually their wife. His wife lives here in Atlanta. Guys that play for or coach for Los Angeles Chargers, New York Giants, of course, Atlanta Falcons, a bunch of them. And so it all started from that Saturday morning, going and apologizing. I didn't even know he was I didn't know he was the defensive coordinator until like a month later, because I didn't follow the Atlanta Falcons too closely at the time because I was a Cleveland Browns fan, and I was so busy working. I honestly didn't even have time to follow sports because like I worked all the time on my dreams. So one day we were out in the front yard, and I had remembered they had mentioned football before. So I said, hey, I was like, who's your favorite football team? And I said this to the defensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. And he's like, oh, I like the Falcons. He's like, actually the defensive coordinator for him. I was like, get out of here. And he's like, yeah. And then, I immediately Googled him, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's, coached in the NFL for 30 years and all this. So that's how it all started, man.
Yeah, and that's incredible because from the stories you've told us on this episode, it's amazing how these things fall into place for you. For people that really just work hard and have a dream, where it all started with that call from Randy Jackson to your friend.
Yeah, Randy Jackson sitting in the studio in L.A. discovering my friend is the reason I'm sitting here today. Now, the guy, the multimillionaire fellow from Silicon Valley, him and his wife, I do a lot on, not a lot, but I do, enough on social media with Instagram and TikTok and all that fun stuff. So his wife starts watching me on social media. They start cheering for me, like with the podcast and all this stuff. They start cheering for me. So long story short, cause he, I don't know how much I should share, but he's been the CFO, the chief financial officer of companies that you've heard of. Guys, very successful fella, and extremely successful, extremely, like, this is the 1%ers type deal. And so anyway, they flew me out to Silicon Valley, like, hey, we know you love podcasting and all this. Why don't we come tour you around and show you the deal? And so they flew me out to Silicon Valley, California, and took me to Facebook and Google and Apple and Instagram and YouTube, and showed me all those places, and like, it took me to the country club where all these 1%ers live, and I'm sitting there like, I've never been into the country club where like you sit there and get a shower and there's a guy standing right outside the thing, or not like watching you naked, but like when you're like brushing your teeth and stuff, and there's a guy just like standing there with like to get your towel to put it in the thing. Like I'm like the richest of the rich, what I mean? The Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cooks or whatever. Like these are the guys, and I'm like in the locker room, and I'm like, oh, unbelievable! This is crazy. And I'm sitting there like in the sauna, like, and people are like, I think I'm some big shot, and I'm literally like, these are the people that would be there. Is like the decamillionaire CFOs and CEOs of Google, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like I'm sitting in Silicon Valley, and they're cheering for me. They're like, dude, we believe in you. Like your podcast is going somewhere. Like, the reason we flew you out here is we see something special in you. Like, go for it, dude. We got your back. And it's all funny because it started with, that overgrown yard that, I needed $60 at the time. And what's funny about that first job we did, by the time all the stuff was said and done, that job cost me like $200 because the little ghetto mower that was in the garage at my friend's house wouldn't even cut the grass. It was so high. So I had to pay my friend to come out. And I didn't have a truck to pick up my buddy's mower. So I ended up like paying $200. I ended up losing like $140, and it took me 2 days. So it was from humble beginnings. We'll say that. But now things are getting really, really fun. And on my show, I shared with you some of my kind of dreams that are, some people would laugh at me and be like, that's unrealistic, but I have like crazy big dreams for the future.
Yeah, and another thing that I take from your story from that moment when you knocked on that lady's house to apologize is that, branding is important because you are your brand, you are your business, and, the fact that you took the time to apologize to her face really, set you apart from anybody else that may be in that situation.
They have become dear, 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 dear friends. They have a lake home here in Georgia. Ben Roethlisberger, he's a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's their neighbor, so I go out boating in the spring and summer, and it's like, there's Ben Roethlisberger, he's a quarterback. I'm like, this is just wild. But like, they let me, like, whenever I want, I get to go to their lake house and go out on the jet skis and all that fun stuff. And so it's just absolutely wild. And but that whole relationship, it started because the guy that was helping me that day, he said, Paul, she was really mad. Like, we wake her and her husband up every Saturday morning. That's their one day a week to sleep in, and like clockwork at 8:01. Because the neighborhood it's a fancy country club. The gate of the neighborhood doesn't open until 8 o'clock. So we're the first one there on Saturday morning, and we crank that blower up. And I felt like I really need to apologize to this woman. But Mike, I didn't apologize to her with the motive of, oh, well, she's rich and famous and she's going to open all these crazy doors for me. I had no idea. I thought she was going to be like slamming the door shut or like not even answering or being like, buzz off, kid, or whatever. Like that really impressed her, that I humbled myself and deeply apologized and explained the situation. That impressed her so much that she hired us. By the next month we had taken over her property. And then by a few months later, we had started the swirl of working for these NFL players, that to this day has been, I actually, the Falcons, the captain of the Atlanta Falcons, and I keep reiterating because I have listeners in New Zealand and Australia, and you're like, my audience on my show is international. So like, they don't know what kind of a big deal this is in our world here in the USA, like, cause they like soccer and like, I don't know, cricket, like all these other games I don't even know about, whatever, rugby. But American football is huge in the United States, the NFL. And so, like the captain of the Atlanta Falcons, he was asking me, like, he's like, hey, man, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Do you think you can help me out? I'm like, what?
Amazing.
Like, yeah, I'll help you out, bro. But it's like, just the way it's all, the tapestry of the whole thing is just unbelievable. I mean, I believe it, but because God's done it, and he's had his hand, as I share about on my show, like, this stuff is not accidental. Like, the Lord has had his hand in a lot of this. I'm sure that one day I'll figure it out, or I'll find out the whole story. I'm like, that is just stunning. How it all, the tapestry of everything is just incredible.
How everything has just fallen into place in the right time at the right place. And, you never know who you're talking to. And obviously on that day, you went in with no exterior motivation other than to apologize. And you like I said, you never know who you're talking to and what that might lead you to, which leads me to, you talk to a lot of people because you interview people on the Green Industry Podcast. Where did this start? What was the catalyst to starting this podcast?
Brian Ring, Stillwater, Minnesota. He's one of those mentors that has helped me in my business. I was literally talking to him daily, and he has a big operation and is doing, he might not publicly want me to share how much he does in revenue each year, so I won't say that, but he does a ridiculous amount for lawn mowing, incredibly high, revenue for the year. With his team, he's got 2 to 3 crews, and they own Stillwater, Minnesota. And so he took the time to invest it in me. And I'm constantly asking him about branding and marketing and search engine optimization and pricing and taxes and you name it. And he helped me, and he took me under his wing, and he taught me all this stuff. And I'm talking to him about efficiency, and I was using a 30-inch mower. And he's like, bro, you need to be using like a 48-inch mower. Like, why are you using a 30? Like, it just gets done twice as fast and you won't be as tired. And I'm like, yeah, but those are like, good ones, like $7,000-$8,000. And I just don't know if the ROI on that. And he's like, what if I give you one for free and a trailer to go with it, so you don't have to give me this complaining about the money part? Then would it increase your efficiency? I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, all right, all you got to do is buy an airplane ticket for $200 and come and pick it up. and it's yours for free. And he had brand new mower, Kawasaki engine, or not brand new mower, but brand new Kawasaki engine, and everything on it was basically brand new. He upgraded all the belts and blades and everything, so everything was perfect. And so I pick it up, and it's an 18-hour drive to bring it back to Atlanta. And have you ever seen that movie, The Field of Dreams?
I haven't, but I've heard about it.
Okay. So in the movie, this guy is in his backyard in Iowa in the cornfields, and a voice from heaven says, if you build it, they will come. And it was not a baseball field. If you build a baseball field, they will come. So he built a baseball field in his backyard in the middle of the cornfield, and everyone thought he was crazy. Like, why are you building a baseball field? Like, it wasn't like in a city with a stadium. It was in Nowhereville. Well, in the plot of the movie, then the baseball legend started showing up and playing baseball in his backyard. I'm driving. I wasn't in Iowa, but I was in Illinois. And I'm going to be as honest as possible, and people can take it for what they want. I'm driving the U-Haul with the mower and the trailer in the back. I'm in Illinois. I'm in the U-Haul, and it's clear as day. I didn't hear an audible voice, but internally it was like a shout. Like I heard it, and I saw a vision attached to it. If you build it, they will listen. If you build it, they will come. And I saw a vision of people all across the United States listening to my podcast. I saw people all over the world listening to I was looking at the radio in the U-Haul. I still had my eye on the road, but it was probably 20 seconds or so. It all flashed before my eyes of guys on mowers, guys in their pickup trucks, guys driving down the highway, guys driving all over, and they're listening to my I didn't even have a podcast. It wasn't even created yet. And I heard the voice, if you build it, they will come. It was like electricity shot through me, and I knew, oh my gosh, I need to start the podcast. So I tell a couple trusted friends. You got to be careful who you share your dreams with, because we talked about this on my show. You don't want people to snatch that and, ruin your hope. So I tell a couple people I trust, and I'm like, yeah, bro, go for it. And so I talked to the people at the radio station about, equipment and setup and getting started. And so I started from scratch, but I started and I said, I have the tendency of starting things and then getting distracted and then, starting something else and then starting something else and then going back to the other thing, and I'm all over the place. And so I said, that vision was so crazy that there's a phrase I heard that you will never know what could have been if you don't do it. I'm going to say that again. You will never know what could have been if you didn't do it. And the vision I had was so glorious. I was like, wow, I want that to actually happen in real life one day. So I told this to the Lord. I said, I'm going to do 100 episodes, and I'm not going to evaluate anything until 100 episodes are done, and then I'll find out. Well, just literally yesterday, we did the 100th episode of the Green Industry Podcast, and we've had listeners from all over the world. Basically, everything I have already visioned has already happened, although I still think we're in the beginning stages of all this. I think it's going to just grow from here. But that's how it all started. I heard that same thing as in the movie, The Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And Mike, I've built the podcast, and they have come from New Zealand, from Australia, from Sweden, from all over, Ireland and all the different parts of Europe. Of course, Canada is a strong presence, United States of America. And I've been on airplane. I get on airplanes. I just was in California, Chicago, Kentucky, Michigan. I'm about to go to Mississippi, back to Michigan. Like, all these trips are paid for by companies, and they're flying me all over to interview folks. And it's unbelievable. But that's where it started, with one whisper from heaven to my heart. If you build it, they will listen. And thankfully, I did build it, and they have listened, and it's changed my life.
And people are definitely going to continue to listen. And if our audience isn't already listening, Green Industry Podcast, some incredible episodes. I'm late to listening it to myself. I think the first time I heard about you, which I'm sure a lot of people must have heard, is when Stanley Genetic had you on his stories and just let you kind of talk about your podcast, and you had him on the show.
Yeah, we were at Brian Fullerton paid me to come up to Michigan to set him up with a podcast. He paid me. He's like, hey, will you come up and build me a studio because he knew that I'm a nerd about audio equipment and, he's like, no budget. I want all the best of the best, but, I'm going to pay you, fly you up and get me set up. And we structured it. So I came the same week of his conference. So I went to his conference and, then the next day we built him an awesome studio. I'm jealous of his studio. It's pretty awesome. And so while I'm at the thing, and I say this to tell you, like, all these doors have just flown wide open. Like Stanley Genetic, he has this huge following, and he's like, hey, Paul, you got 60 seconds? And I'm like, yeah. And he busts out his phone, and he's like, hey, guys, this is Paul from the Green Industry Podcast. And he's like, he's going to tell you about his show. And I literally, like, was on the spot, and I just that's what you must have watched. But it was about the spontaneous and organic as possible. And so stuff like that's just been happening left and right. That's been really, really, really fun. That's why when I tell you, like, there's probably angels, being dispatched, like, moving on my behalf, making all this stuff happen. Cause it's just like, people are like trying to like, now what do I do? How's the formula? And I was like, you have no idea. It's just been like one divine appointment after the other, how this thing's all flown together. And yeah, then Stan's like, Brian put me up at the hotel, because Brian bought the hotel room, and he literally put Stan Genetic in the hotel room right next to mine. So Stan walks in barefooted at like 11 at night one night, and we did a podcast. And then Keith Kalfas and Sean Spencer, some big YouTubers, they came in after that for the 2.5-hour episode, which you mentioned you appreciated that one. So I can't even explain to you how crazy this thing is. But if God puts a dream in your heart, you don't want to wonder. You don't want to sit in a nursing home one day and be like, man, what would have happened if I would have followed through on that? But I'm learning to seize the divine appointments. And there's a saying that I have written on my vision board to seize the lifetime of seize the opportunity of a lifetime in the lifetime of the opportunity. Seize the opportunity of a lifetime in the lifetime of the opportunity. And I feel like there's been an opportunity given to me to podcast, and I'm trying to seize the opportunity and make the most of it. And so I'm on absolute fire. I talk pretty much daily with, other influencers like Brian's Lawn Maintenance and Julio Tomei. And I'm like, dude, you guys got to tame me because I'm about to explode. I'm so pumped up right now. Like, we're living in, and if I got to slow down here, cut me off for time, just let me know. I could talk your ear off. But when I was in Silicon Valley, they literally, this is all paid for. Normally I sit on the back of the airplane. They put me up front and flew me to California and took me to Google and YouTube and Facebook and, I saw all of it, Apple, all of it. And the realization, Mike, that, this is all only in our generation. Like, in the 1940s and 50s and in the 1800s and 1700s and 1400s and 1200s and 700s, and you go all the way back to the beginning of time, we've never had technology and transportation like we have today. And actually, on that 2.5-hour episode, Keith Kalfas and Sean Spencer and we talked about this because we're like, this is insane that we can make a piece of content and then someone from another country can watch it and it can impact their life. And it's just like, I want to use this technology to the best of my ability to impact as many people as possible, in the most positive way. So I'm on a mission, and I couldn't be any more thankful to God that I get to live in this generation for such a time as this, because it's very rare that out of all the generations we could have been born, just to be born at all. I don't know if you ever listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, but he talks about, like, what's the odds of you being born is like 1 in 4 trillion or something crazy, that, you were created at the right time by your mom and dad, we're getting a little in the mood tonight and made you. Like, what's the odds? And then we get to be born with all this technology. And so I just want to use it for good. And I'm on fire right now, Mike. I'm just pumped up.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. Like, we've never lived in a time like today with so much opportunity. And I think everybody owes it to everybody else to bring as much value to everyone else, to better everyone else. And, some people take that bull by the horns and others, let it go by the wayside. And obviously you're on the leading edge in this industry with your podcast and, getting this information into other people's ears. And it's amazing that since the beginning of this interview, it all started with that one phone call from Randy Jackson, and if only he knew how much of an influence that phone call would have and the waves that created in so many people's lives.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. And the other cool thing about, my podcast is I've made it available for free because I learned from, Kenny and Rich and these guys that spent, and Brian Ring and these guys, they spent hours pouring into me. And, we have an archive of 100 episodes. It is completely free. And that's like going to college. Like, it's like going to the university. Now, obviously you can thumb through, and like others are more appealing than, like Vetting Customers by Caleb Allman. Like, that episode's gold. And then some of these other episodes are like just absolute gold, but it's free. So like, you can go in and get yourself an education. Like, the guys like myself that spent year 1, 2, and, part of year 3 in my business in absolute stress. And I got sick a lot. And, the finances were like stressed out. Like, I was stressed out about money. Like, nobody should be going through that. Like, we should be prospering in our businesses, making profit, being healthy, and beyond our businesses, having vibrancy and healthy marriages, healthy relationships with our family and friends. And so we've put all that, all those episodes are completely free. And just like, I wanted to make a resource that I didn't have. Stanley Genetic did have a podcast back in the day, but he stopped making those episodes because he went on to YouTube and Instagram, which, good for him. Like, he blew it up and has just done incredible with all that. But I was like, you know what? I want to make a resource so that no one has to go through the stress, anxiety, fear, and struggles that I went through. But if you actually listen to the show, which is free, there's no excuse. Like, you can get an education, you can learn, you can get inspired, you can get motivated, and you can go and crush it, whether you do lawn care, fertilizer, weed control, landscaping, hardscaping, irrigation, lights, or whatever your niche is. I have a burning passion to I don't want anyone to walk through the years of hell that I had to go through. So we pour our heart and soul into making it the Green Industry Podcast the best resource we can possibly make it to help as many people. So.
And it is a great resource, and you've had so many amazing guests on the show to talk about a variety of subjects. So Green Industry Podcast with Paul Jamison, you can check that on anywhere podcasts can be downloaded, and I definitely urge you to go over and subscribe to that. Leave them a rating and a review, because that really helps. We talk about that on this podcast, but that really helps in getting that podcast out there. And it's like you said, you're offering this information for free, and you can listen to it passively and get amazing knowledge from people from throughout the industry that you may not have the resources to get them on a phone call, but you have their voices in your ears, so you might as well. And all that knowledge is transferable into hardscaping because it's business knowledge in terms of the service type industry that we're in. And Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot for my last question in this interview. And you've obviously learned a lot throughout your years since starting your landscaping business up until this point, but quite specifically tuning this to your podcast. What is that one piece of advice that you've received on your podcast from somebody that you've had on the show that has really, blown you away or really changed your life, or, that one piece of advice that you've heard that really opened up your eyes on your podcast? Do you have something that really stands out to you?
Wow, I'm trying to think. We have 100 conversations from people that have incredible stories. I'm trying to think of which one has been the most impactful. And I think that what's influenced me the most, Mike, is the tears. We've had Alan Hain. He's got, I think, like 280,000 subscribers on YouTube. Sean Spencer's got, he's up and coming. He's got like 40,000. And sitting with these grown men and watching tears come down their eyes is, it's absolutely, it's just, there's this raw and authentic, something that happens, but it's always attached to relationships. And I think the most important thing that I've taken away from my show, and I've interviewed some very successful people, is that our businesses isn't the end game. Like, our businesses and being really passionate about having a successful, profitable business is unto that we can really live out our real destiny, which is, marriage being healthy and intact. Your children not, going off to college and they barely know you, but like your children are your best friends and like relationship stuff like that. And so I think as a young guy in business talking with some of these older guys, it's like I'm stirred up more than ever that my business is here to serve my destiny. Like a lot of guys get where their burden runs their life, or the business is a burden that runs their life. But I think I've taken away that, okay, this business is a gift from God unto making a lot of money and having awesome opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's about these relationships in my life flourishing and being the best that they could be. So that's, I could give a lot of specific examples and details, but, seeing grown men cry and just realize that at the end of the day, being intentional and proactive in those important relationships. On my wall in the studio, I have a picture of my grandpa. He passed away in August, but it's like, there's no amount of money that I could pay if he could come back for one day and I could sit with him and, in a restaurant and have coffee or lunch or breakfast and talk to him all day. Like I'd do anything for that. And I think that we can get so busy sometimes running our businesses that we just take for granted our loved ones. And so just cherishing them and loving them well. And then, hopefully we make, boatloads of money in our business and just ridiculous. Like the bank accounts I used to go to the bank and they didn't know my name. And the lady would always call me James. That's not my name, but it's Paul Jamison. But then the check started getting a little bigger and the money in the bank started getting a little bigger. And then all of a sudden she learned my name. One day she looked up at me and made eye contact. She's like, "Have a great day, Paul." Because you could tell she realized I had a little bit of money now. And I think she was flirting with me. She's a pretty attractive lady herself. But the point is, let's make a bunch of money, not so that we can like scratch our ego, but so that we can enjoy that money with our loved ones. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's my end game is, and I regret I didn't take as much time as I should have when my grandpa was in the nursing home that final year of his life. And I regret that, but that's why I have him in the studio because I miss him. And, I just want people's businesses to succeed so that their relationships can be, the fullest potential of cherishing those loved ones. So.
And I think that's a beautiful way to end this interview. And just give you the floor, Paul. Where can our audience learn more about yourself, the Green Industry Podcast? Where can they listen? And anything else you want to leave them with?
Yeah, Green Industry Podcast. We got an Instagram. You can follow our account there. We hope to be like your Instagram game is strong, man. We were talking about that on my show. Keep up the good work with what you're doing over there. But you can follow us on Instagram, Green Industry Podcast, and then the Green Industry Podcast. It's on every major platform from iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. The artwork is a big picture of me with my big old smile. And I'm at, the majority of these trade shows at the GIE Expo. And, you can find me. We've really kind of gotten into going to all these major events. So, be looking out for us there if you want to meet up in person. But definitely give the show a listen on, if I got an Apple and listen on iTunes and all that, but we're also on Google Play and Stitcher and all that. It's called the Green Industry Podcast.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Visit us at howtohardscape.com for more information on this subject, and let us know what you want to learn about in future episodes by reaching out to us on our social channels. Send us an email to contact@howtohardscape.com if you prefer email. And we'd love it if you would subscribe to our podcast, left us a review. This really helps us get this podcast out there and into more people's ears, and we couldn't do this show without you listening in every week, so thank you for that. We look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.